What's going on? What's going on?
Entertain the geeky.
Goodness. All right, so
Hello.
hi guys. I guess last week we were talking, and you were like, "We need to talk about controversial moments in comic history."
I just thought it was an interesting topic.
It is
I think
interesting.
it's interesting to see how like our perceptions of what we would consider controversial have changed over the years. Because some things that seem much controversial back then don't seem as controversial now, or vice versa, right?
Well, I mean, time is one of those things that shifts perspective on everything, and it's like, okay, maybe that wasn't as big of a deal as we had made of it.
Yeah,
at that
for
point in
sure.
time.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, shoot. Do you have what are some of the controversial moments?
I do. First off, leave a like if you like what we're doing, because apparently that's the thing. So
It is appreciated. More
It's
people get
appreciated.
to see us that way. So.
It's appreciated.
That's
Good.
cool.
Give us a like if you like this. Yeah, I think one of the big obvious ones to start with is probably death of Superman.
Okay.
Right.
Going back to the 90s. Cool.
Yeah. Because it was, I mean, for the first time in a long time, it was a comic book that had got like a national spotlight put upon
It
it.
was in the news.
It was in the papers. They talked about it on nightly news. And while that is a thing that happens still to this day, most of the time it happens because of controversy. And I think this was kind of the first example of that is there was a lot of talk of, is DC killing the golden goose? Is the death of Superman going to change comics forever? It was a whole weird debate among news people for some reason,
right.
which was just weird.
They didn't
to
even
see.
fucking read it. That was
Yeah.
that's the part that's always most odd.
Oh, of course, yeah. When I mean that calls into when Superman's son was a gay character,
Yeah.
and I saw news people saying
Dude.
Superman's gay now, and I was just like,
I remember
what?
I remember seeing those headlines, and I was like, what the fuck?
Like, what are you talking about? Read a book.
And then no, it's not Superman. It's his son.
Yeah,
Superboy, and he's bisexual.
John Kent. Yeah.
It's like Superman's still not gay, motherfucker.
So this is what I'm saying though. John Kent, and so I guess they were right on a certain point of view, right? Because John Kent did become Superman. There was a whole time where Clark was off-world dealing with Mongol and the war world and all this, where Superman was just John. John was Superman.
Right.
Because there needed to be a Superman, so he just took his dad's job.
Right,
and that
right.
comic, Superman Son of Kal-El, is great. It's a great comic. Anyway.
But what made it deserve the attention of fucking newscasters who don't even read it?
Yeah,
And then what happens? This is what happens. So these news outlets put something out on this because the superhero is being killed off, or now he's gay, and they're like, "Hey, did you hear Superman's a gay?" And it's like, what the fuck? And then people post it on social media again with zero context, not understanding.
I saw
what's going
Dean
on.
Cain talking about it.
What the fuck,
Right,
dude?
I saw Dean Cain, the guy who played Superman in The New Adventures of Superman and Lois. Or Lois and Clark,
Yes,
The New
Lois and
Adventures
Clark,
of Superman. Yeah. I'm confusing that with the other one. Okay. But, the death of Superman. So not only did it have that kind of wide, coverage from newspapers, news outlets, and nightly news and stuff, but it had comic fans debating and talking and about what the implication was. And I mean, it was just something that just had kind of held the national conversation for a moment.
So it's funny. Anytime a debate is struck up amongst fans or fanboys, it's good. It's healthy.
Sure.
The community speaking is always fun. And like that's where you get your, hey, is the Millennium Falcon faster than the USS Enterprise? That sort of shit. Like they're funny conversations.
It is not.
They're funny conversations though, and people fucking lose their gourds over it. And when you like, honestly, that's the shit that I wanted this show to be. I wanted those debates and stuff all the time because I'm like, oh, that's magical.
Sure. But it's insane that, again, right? Because there's a lot of controversy. We'll talk about some more here as we go along. But there's a lot of moments that I would argue were way more controversial than just killing off Superman.
Sure.
That didn't get any coverage, that no one talked about.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
But yeah, Death of Superman, it just dominated the zeitgeist for a while.
That blew everything up in the 90s, and it got us the rebirth of Superman.
Oh, the reign of the Superman. That was look. I'm gonna be honest. That came out when I was young. I liked the reign of the Superman. I liked the mystery of. I was 100% convinced that the real Superman was Cyborg Superman.
So the Superman suits that were coming out at that point in time were fucking sick. And
well, sure, but like there was the reign of the Superman was all about like these 4 guys and which one's actually Kal-El. And
yeah. No, I remember.
I thought they had repaired him with cyborg parts.
I remember my uncle coming home with a Death of Superman comic, and I was like, "What the fuck?" And I remember thumbing
in the poly
through
bag,
it, thinking it was so sick.
The bloody Superman symbol on the cover,
and then all these new Supermen started showing up, and that was. Honestly, that was more exciting than the whole death thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and that's the part
getting to
that
see like a new Superman was a good time.
Yeah, that's the part that needed to be publicized.
Yeah,
like it was so good.
And all those guys are still around, right? I mean, it was Steel, it was Cyborg Superman, it was Mon-El, and it was Superboy, right? And they're all still around. They're all characters that stuck around and are part of the story still. But yeah, so obviously that was one that was really widely talked about, but. There was a comic that Garth Ennis did called Preacher, and you've probably seen the TV show. I mean, if you're into this kind of stuff, but the comic is weirder and I would argue better. So if there's any part of you that enjoyed the show, you should definitely check out the comic. It's great.
I will say in our friend group, that is a comic book that is brought up a lot. Because it has like this cult following. Yeah.
It was a really interesting comic book. But there was a moment in it toward the end, might have been the very end. I don't know if it was like in the build up to the end or if it was right at the very end of the story. But we'd been introduced across the story to this guy called the Saint of Killers, who was like this supernatural, bounty hunter. Constantine type of character who hunted angels and demons that were like overstepping, right?
Right.
And so in this, I'm not going to go into the whole story, but right within this universe, the rulers of heaven and hell, God and Satan, Lucifer, respectively, right? They can take jaunts about in the real world. Sabbatical from their duties, and God does take him a sabbatical. And when he comes back to heaven as God, he finds the entire choir of angels murdered, gunshot to the face and head and stuff. And then he looks over to his God throne, his big throne that he sits on, and the Saint of Killers is sitting there, and he kind of God sees him, and God says, "You." And he kind of tips his hat back, cowboy style, and says, "Me." And then he shoots God in the face, and God dies.
So we had talked about this one a little bit last week, because Preacher was never one of my shticks. What year did you say that happened? That was in the 90s, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the comic started in the 80s, but went into the 90s, late 80s, early 90s.
Because that, you know what that reminds me of? Reminds me of Dogma.
Sure.
That's one of those things that had zero business being blown up by the media, but man, that was so fucking controversial.
Yes.
Everybody's like, Kevin Smith, you can't do this.
Yeah.
You piece of shit.
But no one cared about Preacher, apparently.
No.
It's just a little image comic.
No, but really, that is
no one really worried about it.
Way more controversial than the death of Superman.
He killed God. he killed God. God's dead. No more God. And I'm giving that with no context, right? You got to read the story. You got to have the build up. I could sit here for 30 minutes telling you about the story, but it's not really worth all that time. Go read it.
Don't be lazy.
It's a good story, right? But I mean, no one cared about that. No one talked about that. I mean, I had fellow friends of mine who were reading Preacher who were like, "Oh my God, did you see the sublet?" And I was just like, "Yeah, crazy." Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely one of those things that you feel like
that should have garnered national attention. Yes.
Sunk their hooks into as a reason why kids are shooting other kids and why violence exists in our society because of video games and comic books and stuff like that.
Right. It's surely because we saw God get shot in a comic.
Yeah, nonsense. There's never been a link between those two things. Also, there's plenty of games. I think everyone just assumes all video games have violence. There are plenty of games that are not violent in any way. There's plenty of like story-driven games. One of the things I kept hearing about when all that stuff was going on, was, these games are too violent and they're making violent children. And I'm just sitting over here with my PlayStation controller playing Kingdom Hearts, learning about the power of friendship. And I'm like, I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Actually, when I'm done with this, I'm going to go make some new buds.
Yeah, so I never understood those arguments, but it seems like what they did with Preacher would have been rife for that, right? The courts would have sunk their teeth in.
I think because of the size of Image at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
There wasn't a way that it was. But see, I say that, and then Dogma was this topic of so much discussion, and like that was an indie movie.
Yeah, I would argue that no movie past Mallrats is considered an indie movie anymore, right?
You think he was too big at that point?
Yes. It's not an independent film anymore. And Dogma, that's the whole problem with Dogma right now is it's not. It's owned by Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, the Weinstein Corporation.
It was a Weinstein Corp production. And so that's why you don't see Dogma anymore, like on the shelf at a video store.
Well, funny enough, I made sure, because I was telling the kids about it, and I was like, man, This movie stirred up all kinds of shit.
Oh my God. It's a great movie.
And it's a cool flick, man. It's a really cool flick.
It's weird. It's funny.
I was like, let's go get a copy of this. And I found a copy of it, made my kids watch it. And they were like, Dad, this is so bizarre. And I was like, yes.
Exactly.
Yes. But this was the height of Kevin Smith. This was like total expressive freedom and stuff like that. Absolutely. Not that he's not done great shit since then. I mean, I'm
absolutely
repping his stuff right now. But love the guy.
Yeah,
love what he does. Okay, next, what's another controversial moment for you?
So I guess we'll go back to one that got a lot of attention, right? Because I think that's an interesting balance, right? Is to see the ones that are getting attention versus the ones that are far worse and not getting any attention at all.
Okay.
So the next one, obviously, that got really, really big attention, and the writers got death threats, and was Captain America being a Hydra agent? Yes, was Captain America. What people said at the time was Captain America being a Nazi. And look, I've heard the arguments. I understand this point of view, right? Hydra and Nazis are different. They act the same and they do a lot of the same things, but their goals are much different, right? So I would argue, while it is Nazi-esque, Cap was just a Hydra agent. He was an agent of Hydra. Hydra outlasts the Nazis. Hydra has been aligned with every major wartime enemy throughout history. So they just use these people to further their own goals.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's what, okay. So just speaking from a totally objective standpoint, Hydra is a way of personifying Nazi values and stuff without using the symbolism that's there then associated with it. So that's the point of it.
Yes.
While yes, they are not the exact same thing, they're kind of the same thing. And I understand where an uninitiated could definitely draw that conclusion.
Well, and so that's what happened, right?
Yeah.
We had news agencies saying Marvel makes Captain America a Nazi. News agencies across the board, right? This got national attention.
No, that was just as big as I think the Death of Superman.
It was bigger, right? Because of the time we were living in, right? The time we live in.
It was shared. It was shared like this, you know?
Exactly. Death of Superman, we didn't have widespread access to the internet when that comic came out.
No, we did not.
So, yeah, I mean, it was spread everywhere. And again, context is important, right? And I think we talked about that with Superman and his son, John, right?
Yeah.
Context is important. And the context of the day, if you watched the news, was Marvel makes Captain America a Nazi. And that led to, the writers and the creators and stuff getting emails that said, you're unpatriotic and we're going to kill you and all of these. I mean, they got death threats, which is just ridiculous. Why would you do that? Why would you do that?
To the funny book guy.
Right. Like the guy that works at Marvel, you're going to send him a death threat, right? That's just insane. And you should be in jail.
Some of those guys don't make like great money. You know what I mean?
They don't make a lot of money. Dogs came in. That's a thing that happens sometimes.
It does. I plan on putting a curtain up in this doorway over here.
I don't know that a curtain's going to deter dogs.
Right, but the gate was obnoxious and a pain in the ass. I don't know. It was a pain in the ass for dogs too.
Sure. And everybody will say, right? So everybody will say, you know, the reason the story ended the way it did, the reason the story went the way it did is in response to that backlash. And I don't really know who you can trust on this, right? Because the writer would say, no, it was just, that was the story. We sketched out the story before we wrote it.
We had a fucking storyboard meeting.
Right. We know what we knew where the story was going the whole time. That's how the comic industry works. I mean, you're not pitching an issue at a time. You're pitching an arc.
Right.
Right. And the publisher then approves or denies it. So ultimately, it's not the guy who they show us as Captain America is not even Captain America, right? Because the Tesseract had altered the timeline, but it couldn't change Captain America because he's too heroic,
too awesome,
he's too patriotic, and instead it split him.
Mm-hmm.
It took out part of him that it could influence, and then they imprisoned the rest, which was the true Captain America, right? And he comes back at the end and he saves the day and whatnot.
That's what Captain America does,
right?
Yeah.
So the response came from the ending of one issue of the book, the first issue of the book, of a 9 or 10 issue series. I don't even remember. I think it was 9.
Look, you don't leave motherfuckers on cliffhangers.
I guess not. I guess that's not how the medium works. Because look, I've been reading since I was a little child, and it's pretty much always worked that way. That's how it works.
Right. That way, you want to buy the next issue.
Right. So let the story progress a little bit before your headline says Marvel makes Captain America a Nazi. Like what? You're just inflaming people.
Right.
You're just trying to make people angry.
You are being.
Why are you doing that?
You're just being a provocateur.
Yeah, and I'm not picking on any network specifically. They're all guilty of this.
I'll pick on all of you.
This like panic media that we all live in, where everything is so terrible. Bombshell, breaking news, kaboom.
Right, and it's a fucking it's a funny cartoon book.
It drives me nuts. It's a comic book, guys. Calm down.
Well, that's the part that's so ridiculous about it. It's like they've been discounted for years. They were it was bullshit.
Right.
It was stuff that you bought for your kid.
And I understand the argument, right? Because Captain America was created by Jewish men.
Sure.
Right? So I understand the not wanting Captain America to be a Nazi. Okay, so let the story play out a little bit, because I doubt that any writer, I don't care who you are, I don't care if you're the top writer in Marvel and everybody loves everything you do and the publisher loves everything you do. If you pitched an idea to the publisher that you're going to change Captain America's history and he's going to be a Hydra guy, and going forward, that's the story, the first question of anyone that is, shareholder or in charge or sitting in that room is going to say, so how long until he's not?
Right.
You don't get to keep Captain America being a Hydra guy, right?
We need to make money on him. How long until he's a good
guy?
So
there's no way you're ever going to pitch the idea and get it approved that you're turning Captain America into a Hydra agent and he's going to stay that way. No. We need it all wrapped up by the end of the crossover so that we can move on like it never happened.
I mean, funny enough, we've had it happen with Spider-Man twice.
Oh, it's another controversial moment we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this one just is ridiculous.
No, that one was huge. Well, you know what's so funny about it?
It's ridiculous how the media has brainwashed everyone.
So one of the artists in that arc drew Jordan Peterson as Red Skull.
I don't remember hearing about that.
Yeah, so it was this whole thing. So what Jordan Peterson did, totally different figure, has nothing to do with comic books.
Right, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
What he did is he started making these Hale lobster ties and stuff that he could sell on his website. God. It was fucking brilliant. He leaned into it so well. And then he bought a bunch of the comics where they used him as the inspiration as Red Skull, and he autographed them. And I'm like, dude, that's fucking brilliant. Like, if you're going to have this friction with a comic book artist and they're like, all right, all right, cool, man. I'll make money on your work. I'm autographing it. And it was so fucking funny.
Sure.
The Captain America franchise has been fantastic for that over the last couple of years.
Oh, the Captain America I would argue the Captain America franchise is always pretty good, right? Depending on what they're doing. They're sure. I mean, like any comic series, there are going to be arcs where you're just like, this isn't as good.
It's so, yeah.
Yeah. But I would argue most of Captain America has been pretty good. But the people that get that job are usually the people that are pretty damn good at this. You know, your Greg Ruckas, your J. Michael Straczynski's. J. Michael Straczynski just started writing Captain America, by the way. And I've only read one issue, but it was a good issue. I'm interested in seeing where it goes. But so, yeah, that one was just, again, the same kind of media attention, but like, again, just twisting the message and making people angry for nothing.
It's about being a provocateur. If it bleeds, it leads. It's the same concept. They're like, whatever we can do to stir shit up. This thing that's supposed to be good and holy is evil, and he's a Nazi.
Sure.
You should write to the publisher.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
it's this, like I said, it's this anger media that we all seem to be stuck in.
Well, if you don't even read it, who fucking cares?
Well, I don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand why anyone would care that doesn't read Captain America comics.
Right.
But,
I mean, here
a lot of people did. They sent him death threats.
I guess I could see like if your kids read it and you were totally just had zero fucking idea what was going on, and you're like, no, I want my kid to have a role model, not a Nazi in his life.
The role model part of him is who saves the day in the end, so he will. Just give it a few issues.
It takes a second.
Yeah, give it a few issues for us to understand that. We're telling a story, you know. But I would argue if you out there, you saw that kind of coverage and it made you go, that's terrible, go read the book, right? You can still get it. It's still in print. It's, like I said, 8 or 9 issue miniseries all collected in one book.
Yeah, you can get the trade.
You can still get it, right? Like, read it. Understand that it wasn't as bad as everyone made it out to be. And while it wasn't a great story, it wasn't a horrible story either. I mean, the thing I'm going to talk about next is much worse. You know, like, it's not a horrible story. It's actually a pretty decent told Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 type of story.
You prefaced that really well. What's much worse?
So the other this next thing is didn't get coverage. I mean, it had a lot of comic people upset, but it was Brand New Day. In Spider-Man, or One More Day, or whatever it was called. It was essentially the thing where they like retconned everything that had happened to Peter and altered it and reset his timeline. Right? So all this continuity for Spider-Man, this is what the editor-in-chief had to say at the time, right? Is there's too many branches to Spider-Man's story. We need to condense it back into a single branch. Right? Because Spider-Man was a character that had so many comics, and he's the same guy in each one. So it's just like, how is he doing all of this stuff, right? And continuity, the how we kept track of continuity wasn't as tight in the 80s and 90s.
We were very liberal with how we did
like it was then, you got an idea for a story, okay, write the story. Yeah. We'll fit it in later, right? So
doesn't have to make sense.
This was Mephisto essentially resetting Spider-Man's timeline. Yeah. And in so doing, got rid of some things that were really good and really impactful to Spider-Man's story. His love and his relationship with Mary Jane and their daughter, May Parker, right, was a huge, awesome thing that had happened. And we just got rid of that entirely. And we just reset it back to factory default Spider-Man, right? So this was something that, well, like I said, it didn't get a lot of attention. It was terrible. Like, it was just a thing that threw out so much of what made Spider-Man a enduring, relatable character. And they've brought some of those things back in subsequent things, because then they introduced us to the Spider-Verse, and we got to see, there is a universe where May Parker exists, and she's Spider-Girl, right? We got to see that happen, which was cool, but it was part of our Spider-Man. It was part of main Spider-Man continuity. And we've proven time and time again, at least on the DC side, that the progeny, the offspring, the adopted children growing up and coming into their own is a great, important part of the story. It's okay for Batman to take a back seat to Nightwing.
100%.
It's okay for Superman to take a back seat to John Kent. It's okay to do those things. And that's what Spider-Man was building to, was this moment where it's okay for Peter to relax. She's out there. She's got it. She's protecting the whole city.
Holding shit down.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that's the legacy of comics. And Brand New Day or One More Day, or I don't even remember what it was called. It was one of those things. Was just an example of a really bad story that was attempting to do what they thought the fans wanted, which obviously blew up in their faces, and it's hated among comic fans.
Like, this is one of the things that
I mean, this is a thing that is universal, though. I don't think you could talk to a Spider-Man comic fan and them say, yeah, that was great.
I think publishers need to understand that one of the things that makes these characters fun is that there is so fucking much. After 60 years of Spider-Man, okay?
Yeah.
We have so many different stories that any one person can find something, an arc that they like within Spider-Man.
Absolutely.
And that makes for good shit. So guess what? Just leave it all. Leave it alone. Who fucking cares? And I think opening up the multiversal idea.
Well, yeah, you can split it up. You can have this be a different universe.
Yeah. But it's just like, man, leave it alone. Who fucking cares? It doesn't have to make sense. It's a goddamn comic book. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, it's...
Make your arc make sense.
It's one of those things, that we've talked about it on the show before, but it's one of those things with the MCU and people kind of being down on how it feels very disconnected. And I'm just like, yeah, guys, but that's comics sometimes.
Yep.
Comics don't all have to be connected to have a big crossover later. They don't have to be.
Not at all.
It's fine that they do their own things. One of the things that I heard a lot back when, what's a good example? Iron Man 3 is a good example. Came out, and the president gets kidnapped in that movie. And the question I got is, where the hell's Captain America? The president got kidnapped? That feels like a Captain America job, right? It's a government guy. And I remember going, you guys, you got to look at this from the perspective of a comic fan, right? From a comic reader. I read Invincible Iron Man. I read Captain America. I read Thor. And I also read Avengers, right? They have little solo adventures that are just about them. And maybe sometimes there'll be cameos. And that happens. That's happened in movies, right?
Happens all the time, yeah.
We had Falcon and Ant-Man.
Right.
That happens, right? Sometimes. But it doesn't have to be that way all the time. And that's why I think the MCU is good, right? It's structured in that way. We don't have to call everybody for every little thing.
Right.
Sometimes we can just be watching Iron Man's adventures. Sometimes we can just be watching Captain America's adventures.
I agree.
And then Avengers, we'll bring them all together and we'll have a big adventure that's
that's
bigger than all of them. They all need to come together.
That's when we do this big thing. We break out the big stick and we hit the big bad.
Yeah. We've done Thanos. We've done Ultron. We've done, we're going to do Kang. There are things that are bigger than individual characters. Mm-hmm. And in that regard, you do the big crossovers. It's why I read all the solo books and I read Avengers, right? Because Avengers is the book.
Get us fixed.
Well, Avengers is the book where it's this is a threat too big for any one of us. Right, we need to team up on this. But again, I don't think you're going to find a Spider-Man fan that is going to say, yeah, it was great. It's not. It's bad. It's really bad. And it spits in the face of longtime comic fans who enjoy continuity. I enjoy continuity. That is one of the things about comics that I like. And I like people who can retcon, because that's what this was. Let's be honest. It was a retcon.
Gracefully.
But I like people who can retcon gracefully, right? Who can retcon in a way that makes me feel like everything has changed, but nothing has changed.
If you can tip your hat to that which came before you,
yes,
and then tell your story, you are a good comic book writer.
Yes,
and your Hickmans and stuff like that are very good at that.
Absolutely,
I can completely agree with that.
Yeah.
One thing that got a lot of attention, and it was at a tumultuous time.
Oh, we're back to another one that's got a lot of attention. Okay,
it did get a lot of attention. It was Death of Wolverine. It didn't get as much as Death of Superman. It didn't get, but that was one that was talked about.
I mean, I remember seeing it talked about in the news, and
it was this weird thing because it was a 5-issue miniseries. It was supposed to be this fucking big epic thing, and all they did was take Wolverine off the shelf for a minute.
Yeah.
And basically try to put him on hold so Fox wasn't getting shit out of him.
They encased him in adamantium.
Yeah. So what Fox did is they said, okay, here's Old Man Logan. It was an incredible thing that happened there.
It was.
Like
they resulted in one of the best movies they ever made.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Great movie.
So yeah, that was one of those things. I want to watch
it right now. Every time someone brings it up, I'm just like, let's watch it right now.
Dude, it's a fucking great flick.
It's a great movie.
It's a great flick, man. And
it's not great because it's a great X-Men flick. It's great because it's a great human story. It's a great human story that is driven not by MacGuffin, but by characters and the arcs that they're going through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great.
Absolutely.
People could learn a lot of lessons from that film.
It's
a lot of filmmakers.
It's one of the best superhero movies to come out over the last 20 years, I would say. Not the best.
It is one of the best, I will agree. Yeah, it's one of the best.
I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's a good standalone movie, which I think makes it even more special.
Yeah, you didn't need to see the other Wolverine movies to watch it.
Not at all.
And you just watch it. It's great.
Yeah. So Death of Wolverine was one that I thought was interesting. It was a big deal, and it was odd.
It was not a really big story, though. It kind of ended on
it was totally like he's doing this weird fucking mob contract.
Well, he got revenge. He got revenge ultimately in the end. He got revenge on the Weapon X people, right? And that was kind of a thing that was a long time coming. But in getting revenge, he got encased. He got like covered in liquid adamantium.
Yeah, and it hardens, and you see him. And
he just like turns into an adamantium statue of himself.
Yeah,
it was weird. It was a really weird thing. And then when they brought him back, they kind of just glazed over how he got out of there. If I remember right, I don't remember them actually giving a definitive answer as to how he got out of there.
They didn't. They're like, well,
I feel like someone just found the cocoon. And it was open, and he was gone. And it was just like, well, but how?
No, that was exactly
but how did he get out of there?
Exactly it. Fucking stupid. Fucking stupid. So yeah, that was.
Yeah, it was not a great story. It had some cool moments, but it was not a great story.
The fucking cover was incredible too, man.
Sure, it had beautiful art.
They have Death holding Wolverine in his arms, like.
That was actually a variant cover.
It was, I guess.
Yeah, that was.
But there was such cool imagery
cover, I believe,
associated with it, and dog shit story, man.
Nah, not a great story. So yeah, I mean, it's that one. I remember seeing people talking about that one. Like I remember seeing like news outlets talking about that one, but that was not controversial at all. It's weird. It's a weird thing where a lot of the biggest controversial moments that piss off the fans and get the fans talking, no one cares about.
Right.
It's only the moments that can be that polarizing.
Sure.
Captain America's a Nazi.
Well, that was the thing that was so interesting about that, because Death of Wolverine.
Wolverine's gonna die.
I remember being in the shop and talking to people about it, and they're like, "This is fucking stupid," and like.
I mean, I don't remember anybody ever getting that angry about it.
I talked to a couple of guys that were like, "This is bullshit."
But
you can't kill him like this.
Well, everybody. So you hit the nail on the head earlier with what you were saying. I definitely, when people would get animated about it, I'm just like, guys, look, it's just to stop giving Fox access to the best characters in their stories.
Right. As
soon as this changes, Wolverine will be back. He ain't going nowhere. He's the golden goose. Like, he's not gonna go.
We all knew that, I think.
Well, it was the same with Superman.
Whole thing,
right? I mean, that was at a time when it wasn't such a cliche that people die and come back. That death felt like it was going to be permanent, but it was not permanent.
It was not at all.
Let's be honest, right? There was no way it was ever going to be.
Do you have any more that you want to jump into here before we wrap up?
No, those were kind of the big ones that I had on my list.
I didn't make a list. I was just going to feed on yours. The Death of Wolverine one was something that I remember a few folks getting butthurt about in the shop. Yeah. And I mean, myself included, I was like, this is fucking stupid.
Yeah.
And I knew what it was. It was just stupid. And it was this weird pissing contest between Marvel and Fox.
Yeah.
Very odd.
No, yeah. I mean, I had a list of stuff that I just thought, because again, I liked the idea of going over things that, captured the country's attention versus things that were much worse or in some cases more controversial that just didn't.
No. Dead Superman.
Dead Superman,
Gay Superman,
and Nazi Captain America.
And Nazi Captain America were huge, yeah.
Yeah, there's things they can latch onto and inflame the audience about. Yeah. Anger media, it's bad.
You guys need to go to entertainthegeeky.com. You can follow us on all of our social media there. Imagination. Sorry, I saw that and had to speak on it. You can follow us on all of our social media there. If you have not already, like, comment, subscribe. We appreciate all of that. Is there anything that you think has been more controversial than what we've talked about today?
Oh, we barely scratched the surface.
I mean, barely.
Oh,
but this would be a 4-hour long conversation otherwise.
Leave it in the comments. Yeah, let us know. We'll talk about them in a future video.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. As always, stay geeky.